What if I told you the Defiance of Duskendale was never truly about taxes, or charters, or the pride of a minor lord? What if it was a trap? A trap designed not by Dennis Darklin, nor even by his ambitious wife, Sarala, but by the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms, Tywin Lannister. In the official histories, the Defiance is remembered as a reckless act of rebellion, one that changed the Seven Kingdoms forever, pushing King Aerys into the paranoia and cruelty that would define his final years. But history often records only what the victors allow, and in this case, the victor may have been standing quietly at the side of the Iron Throne, watching the chaos unfold exactly as he had planned. I'm going to revisit the Defiance of Duskendale and explore a theory that Tywin Lannister was not merely a bystander, but the architect. The year was 277 AC. The reign of King Aerys Targaryen had not yet descended into its final spiral, but the cracks were beginning to show. In his early years, Aerys had shown promise, but by this point he was growing increasingly unstable. Erratic decisions, sudden bursts of cruelty, and a vindictive streak toward anyone who challenged him. His reign, however, still functioned, and it functioned largely because of one man, Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King for nearly 2 decades. Tywin was the true engine of the realm's governance, efficient, ruthless, and feared. But their relationship had soured. Tywin's competence had begun to overshadow Aerys's authority. The king, once dependent on his hand, now saw him as a rival. Small slights began to multiply. Aerys refused to marry his son, Rhaegar, to Tywin's daughter, Cersei. He mocked Tywin in public, and perhaps most damaging of all, he hinted that Tywin's position was not as secure as the man believed. Meanwhile, beyond the Red Keep's walls, there was trouble brewing in Duskendale. Duskendale was a modest but wealthy port on the narrow sea, once the seat of kings in its own right. Lord Dennis Darklin ruled there with his wife, Lady Sarala of Myr, a woman accustomed to the merchant liberties and political freedoms of the free cities. Together, they resented the crown's control over Duskendale's trade, particularly its restrictions on selling directly to Essos. For years, these grievances simmered, but now, under the unstable Aerys, the Darklins saw opportunity. Lord Dennis petitioned the crown for a new charter, one that would grant the town greater autonomy. Aerys refused. The matter could have ended there, but instead it ignited into one of the most dangerous episodes of his reign, and it is here where our theory begins. Because what if the Darklins did not act alone? What if someone, with everything to gain from destabilizing the king, was quietly encouraging them to push further? Frustrated by the king's refusal, Lord Dennis invited Aerys to Duskendale, supposedly to negotiate in person. Many on the king's council urged the king not to go, warning it was beneath his dignity to be summoned by a vassal. The Hand, Tywin Lannister, reportedly opposed the trip, but Aerys, driven by pride, went anyway, bringing with him only 10 household guards and 1 knight of the king's guard, Sir Gawain Gaunt. Upon his arrival, the gates closed behind him. The king was seized by Dennis's guards. All the king's escort were killed defending their king, including Sir Gawain, who was slain by Dennis's master at arms, Sir Simon Hollard. Then King Aerys was taken prisoner inside the Dun Fort. What followed was a tense 6-month standoff. The royal army surrounded Duskendale, but Dennis refused to release the king without concessions. Aerys, locked away, grew more paranoid and furious. Finally, Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard, being a heroic badass, volunteered to perform a bold rescue. Sir Barristan infiltrated the town alone, avenged Sir Gawain's death by killing Simon and freeing the king from his captivity and escaping the Dun Fort before being captured himself. All the while, Sir Barristan received an arrow wound to his chest. Without the royal hostage, Lord Dennis was forced to surrender. The aftermath was brutal. House Darklin was destroyed, its lands seized, and Lady Sarala burned alive. Aerys emerged from the ordeal a changed man, fearful, suspicious, and far less willing to leave the Red Keep. But there's a crucial detail to remember. During the entire crisis, the realm continued to function, with Tywin Lannister more or less ruling the Seven Kingdoms. To understand my theory, we must first understand Tywin's possible motives. First, there was power. Tywin had ruled his hand for almost 20 years. He was used to decisive control, something Aerys increasingly resented. Every month, the king pulled more authority back into his own hands, even when it meant damaging the realm. Second, there was personal insult. Tywin had groomed his daughter Cersei for marriage to Prince Rhaegar, a match that would have united the realm's two most powerful houses. Aerys not only refused, he mocked the idea in front of the court, saying Tywin was merely a servant of the crown. Third, there was strategy. Tywin was too intelligent to attempt an outright coup. Such an act would destroy House Lannister's legitimacy. But a crisis, one that removed the king from court temporarily, one that forced Tywin to take full control in his absence, could achieve the same goal without a drop of royal blood being spilled. Think about it. If the king were taken hostage, the Hand would have no choice but to run the kingdom. The longer the king remained absent, the more accustomed the lords and small folk would become to the Hand as the real power. And then there's Aerys's pride, the most dangerous weapon in the realm, and one Tywin knew how to exploit. All it would take was a subtle whisper that Lord Dennis was speaking of the king with disrespect, that he might be more willing to deal with the king himself than the Hand. Such a suggestion could almost guarantee that Aerys would march straight into Duskendale. For Tywin, the rewards would be enormous. 1. The king's prestige, already fragile, would be shattered. 2. Aerys's paranoia and dependence on Tywin would deepen. And 3. The idea of removing the king from public life might no longer seem so unthinkable. And if the king happened not to return, well, that would be tragic, but politically useful. So, why Duskendale? Geographically, it was close enough to King's Landing to make the king's visit seem plausible, yet far enough to remove him from the capital's immediate protection. Economically, the Darklands were frustrated. Royal trade restrictions forced Duskendale's merchants to sell goods through King's Landing, cutting into their profits, despite the fact this had been happening ever since King's Landing became a thriving city and port. Lady Sarala, being from the Free City of Myr, favored the independence of the Free City ports. Politically, Dennis was ambitious, but not suicidal. He would never openly rebel unless he thought he had quiet support from someone powerful enough to shield him, or at least to make use of his rebellion. This is where the theory sharpens. Imagine Tywin, or one of his agents, feeding Dennis carefully chosen reassurances. Not direct promises, of course. Tywin was too cautious for that. But perhaps hints that the crown was vulnerable, that the Hand was sympathetic to local grievances, that an audience with the king could be arranged. For Dennis, the appeal would be obvious, a chance to gain his charter, humiliate his rivals, and force the king to listen. For Tywin, it all was a means to an end. So, here are the steps in Tywin's plan. Step 1. Begin with indirect contact. Tywin's agents in the Crown Lands, merchants, minor lords, even disgruntled knights, could stoke Dennis's frustrations. They could suggest that his cause had quiet supporters in King's Landing, and that the king himself might be persuaded. Step 2. Tywin knows Aerys's psychology. Arrange for word to reach the king through channels Aerys believes he controls, that Dennis Darkland is speaking ill of him, perhaps even refusing to deal with anyone but the king in person. The insult to Aerys' pride would be irresistible. Step 3. Once Aerys is imprisoned, Tywin takes command of the realm in this crisis. He avoids rash assaults that could risk the king's life. Every passing week, the court grows more accustomed to Tywin as sole ruler. Step 4, at the right moment, perhaps when political benefits have peaked, Tywin allows a solution that paints him as the loyal servant. Barristan Selmy's daring rescue is permitted, even celebrated. The king returns alive, but changed. By the end of it, Tywin emerges with his reputation enhanced, his grip on power tightened, and his rival, the king, permanently diminished. In the aftermath of the Defiance, it seems Tywin got what he wanted more or less. Aerys's prestige took a devastating blow, as no king in living memory had been so humiliated. His paranoia intensified. He withdrew from public life, rarely leaving the Red Keep, and began to see enemies in every shadow. Ironically, this made him more dependent on the small council, and thus on Tywin. Cersei's marriage prospects also improved in theory. If Aerys's instability became undeniable, Rhaegar's advisors might look more favorably on a politically stabilizing Lannister match. And finally, Tywin had proven without ever saying so, that the realm ran more smoothly under his stewardship than under the king's direct rule. That idea, once planted, would never entirely disappear. So why isn't this theory accepted as fact? Well, as the old saying goes, it's easy for 3 people to keep a secret if the other 2 are dead, because Tywin left no trace of his potential involvement. There are no letters, no surviving witnesses, no evidence that directly ties him to the Darklands' actions. Every link is circumstantial. House Darkland was utterly destroyed, with every member executed, their servants and guards silenced. If anyone might have spoken, they did not live long enough to do so. And Tywin's public conduct was impeccable. He opposed the king's visit to Duskendale, ordered the siege, and welcomed Aerys home with all the proper ceremony. To the history books, that looks like loyalty, yet the gaps in the record are precisely where suspicion thrives. The Defiance of Duskendale is remembered as the turning point in Aerys' reign, the moment the king we would call mad began his final descent. Whether Tywin Lannister's hand guided it from the shadows, we cannot prove, but if we look at who gained the most, who emerged stronger, and who was cunning enough to orchestrate such a crisis without leaving fingerprints, one name stands above the rest. In the Game of Thrones, victories are not always won on the battlefield. Sometimes they're won in the quiet, with a whisper here, a suggestion there, and the patience to let pride do the rest. So perhaps the question is not whether Tywin caused the defiance, but whether anyone else could have profited from it so completely.
Hi everyone, Blue here. First of all, thanks for watching. If you watched, like, comment, subscribe, you know what to do. I try to slow down my narration, so hopefully it sounds better. Let me know if you like the theory videos, if the length is okay, if you'd rather me do longer ones or shorter ones. Anyway, that's all I got for now. See you later. Bye for now.